While European kings could not read and European cities were built from mud, one city on earth held 1,000,000 books. Its scholars had already solved mathematical problems that Europe would not discover for 500 years. Its hospitals had wards for different diseases. Its streets were lit at night. Its caliph corresponded with Charlemagne as an equal and sent him an elephant as a gift. Then the Mongols came. What happened to the Abbasid Caliphate? The chronicler described Baghdad.
The caliph's engineers built the city as a perfect circle, 1 mile across, for gates pointing to the 4 corners of the earth. At the center, the caliph's palace with its green dome visible for 50 miles. Every road on earth leads to Baghdad. Every idea on earth passes through it.
The Abbasids built the House of Wisdom. They sent agents to every corner of the known world to buy books. Greek philosophy, Persian astronomy, Indian mathematics, Sanskrit medicine. Everything was translated into Arabic. Everything was preserved. Everything was built upon. The House of Wisdom was not just a library. It was an engine. The chronicler examined the manuscripts.
A scholar named Al-Khwarazmi has written a book that solves problems no one has solved before. He calls his method algebra. We call it algebra. The word algorithm comes from his name. Every computer on earth runs on ideas this man wrote in Baghdad 1,200 years ago.
Baghdad sat at the center of the world's trade routes. Silk from China. Spices from India. Gold from Africa. Furs from Russia. Everything passed through the Abbasid Caliphate. The customs duties alone made the caliph the wealthiest ruler on earth. The city grew to a population of 1,000,000 people. The largest city in the world. Abbasid hospitals had separate wards for different diseases. They had pharmacies, medical libraries, and outpatient clinics. Doctors had to pass examinations before practicing. The physician Ibn Sina wrote a medical encyclopedia that was used in European universities for 600 years. Europe called him Avicenna. They used his book until 1650.
Knowledge is the only treasury that grows when you spend it. Every scholar we feed costs us gold. Every idea they produce is worth more than all the gold in our treasury. Baghdad is not a city. Baghdad is a mind.
Abbasid astronomers calculated the circumference of the Earth to within 200 kilometers of the correct answer in the 9th century. They named the stars. Most stars visible tonight still carry their Arabic names. Aldebaran, Betelgeuse, Rigel, Deneb. You are looking at an Abbasid map every time you look at the night sky. Today Baghdad is the capital of Iraq. The round city is gone. The House of Wisdom is gone. The Great Library is gone. The Caliphate is gone. What happened in 1258 was not just a military defeat. It was one of the greatest losses of human knowledge in history. The question is how a civilization that brilliant could be destroyed so completely. The story of the Abbasids begins with the story of Islam itself. After the Prophet Muhammad died in 632 AD, his successors called caliphs built an empire with a speed that stunned the ancient world. In 1 century Islam spread from Arabia to Spain in the west and to Central Asia in the east. Nothing in history had moved so fast. The chronicler described the tension.
The Umayyad caliphs rule from Damascus. They are Arab by blood and Arab in their preferences. The Persians who converted to Islam, the Berbers, the Egyptians, all Muslims, all second class. The empire is vast, but its heart is narrow. That narrowness will destroy it.
In 747 AD the Abbasid revolution began under black banners. The Abbasids were descendants of the Prophet's uncle. They promised an Islam that belonged to all Muslims equally, not just Arab aristocrats. Persians, Iraqis, Central Asians all rallied to them. In 3 years the Umayyad dynasty was destroyed.
The Abbasids did not merely change the rulers. We changed the idea of what a Muslim empire could be. Not an Arab empire that happened to be Muslim. A Muslim empire that welcomed every people, every language, every mind that sought God and knowledge.
The Abbasid Caliph al-Mansur built a new capital. Not in Arabia. Not in Syria. In Iraq, on the banks of the Tigris, at the crossroads of the ancient Silk Road. He called it Madinat al-Salam, City of Peace. The world called it Baghdad. It was finished in 4 years. Within a generation it was the largest city on earth. The chronicler described the translation movement.
The caliph sends gold to Constantinople, to India, to Persia, to buy books. Translators are paid the weight of their translations in gold. Every text that human civilization has ever produced is being gathered here and made available to every scholar in every language. Nothing like this has ever been attempted.
Harun al-Rashid ruled at the peak of Abbasid power. His court was the setting for the tales of 1001 Nights. His correspondence with Charlemagne has survived. The king of the Franks and the commander of the faithful exchanged letters, gifts, and diplomatic missions across the width of the known world. The Abbasids brought papermaking technology from China and transformed it into an industry. Paper was cheaper than papyrus and more durable than wax tablets. Suddenly books could be produced in quantities that had never been possible. Literacy spread. Knowledge spread. Baghdad had a street of booksellers a mile long. The Abbasids built a postal system that connected their empire from Spain to Central Asia. Letters, intelligence reports, and commercial information moved faster than any other communication system on earth. The caliph knew what was happening on every frontier within days. The empire was held together by paper and horses. The scholars of the Abbasid Golden Age did not just translate ancient knowledge. They built on it, corrected it, and surpassed it. Al-Kindi was the first philosopher to write systematically in Arabic. Al-Farabi reconciled Aristotle with Islamic theology. Ibn Rushd, known in Europe as Averroes, kept Greek philosophy alive when Europe had forgotten it existed. The chronicler described Abbasid medicine.
Al-Zarawi has invented over 200 surgical instruments. He has written a 30-volume medical encyclopedia with illustrations of every instrument and every procedure. European surgeons will copy his illustrations for 500 years. They will not always know where the illustrations came from.
The geographer Al-Idrisi created the most accurate map of the known world in the 12th century. He worked for a Norman king in Sicily. His map showed the world more accurately than any European map produced for the next 300 years. Knowledge does not respect political borders. It goes where it is welcome.
We do not ask a scholar where he was born or what God he prays to. We ask what he knows. A Christian who understands the movement of stars serves God and the caliphate equally. Truth has no religion.
Arabic became the Latin of the medieval world. A scholar from Morocco could correspond with a scholar in Persia or India or Spain in the same language. Knowledge moved freely across a world that spoke Arabic as the language of civilization. The Abbasid Caliphate had created a single intellectual community stretching from the Atlantic to Central Asia. The chronicler described the agricultural revolution.
The Abbasids have moved crops around the world. Cotton from India now grows in Spain. Sugar cane from New Guinea now grows in Egypt. Hard wheat, rice, sorghum, eggplant, spinach, artichoke. The Abbasid trade routes have transformed what every civilization on Earth eats.
Abbasid craftsmen developed techniques in glass, ceramics, and metalwork that were centuries ahead of anything produced in Europe. Lustreware pottery with its metallic sheen. Blown glass of extraordinary delicacy. Inlaid metalwork of impossible intricacy. The objects they made are in museums today and designers still study them. The tales of 1001 Nights were collected and written down in Baghdad during the Abbasid Golden Age. Sinbad the Sailor. Aladdin. Ali Baba. These stories have been translated into every language on earth. They have shaped literature, film, and imagination across every culture for 1,000 years. The Abbasids gave the world its most beloved stories. At its peak, the Abbasid Caliphate connected 3 continents. It was not just an empire. It was a civilization. The Islamic Golden Age produced more advances in mathematics, medicine, astronomy, philosophy, and literature than any comparable period in any other civilization. It laid the foundation for the European Renaissance that came 3 centuries later. Then the cracks appeared. The Abbasid caliphs made a fatal decision. They imported Turkish soldiers to serve as their personal guards. The Turks were loyal, disciplined, and ferocious in battle. They were also politically ambitious. Within 2 generations, the Turkish guards were appointing and deposing caliphs at will. The caliph became a religious symbol. The Turkish commanders became the real power. The chronicler described the crisis.
In 50 years, the Turks have killed 4 caliphs and installed 8 more. The commander of the faithful commands nothing. He signs documents the Turks put before him. He performs ceremonies the Turks permit him to perform. He is a golden puppet in a golden cage.
The empire began to fragment. Provincial governors stopped sending taxes to Baghdad and started keeping them. Independent dynasties arose across the caliphate. The Fatimids in Egypt declared their own rival caliphate and called Baghdad illegitimate. The Buyids in Persia were Shia Muslims who controlled Baghdad while the Abbasid Caliph was Sunni. The empire was a shell.
My grandfather ruled from Spain to Samarkand, and every governor sent gold to Baghdad. I rule the palace I sit in and the scholars I feed. Perhaps that is enough. Perhaps the ideas outlast the empire. I have to believe that.
From the west, the Crusaders arrived. Jerusalem fell to Christian armies in 1099. For 2 centuries the Crusaders held territory in the heart of the Islamic world. Baghdad was too far away and too weak to respond effectively. The caliphate that had once been the center of the world watched from the sidelines of its own civilization's crisis. The chronicler described the new threat.
From the east comes a people like nothing the world has seen. They are not interested in trade. They are not interested in tribute. They are interested only in submission or destruction. They have already destroyed the greatest cities of Central Asia. Merv, Samarkand, Nishapur, cities of 1 million people reduced to fields of bones.
Genghis Khan's grandson Hulagu Khan assembled the largest Mongol army ever sent west. His orders were explicit. Take Baghdad. Destroy the caliphate. He had engineers from China for siege warfare. He had Persian administrators to manage what came after. He had an Nestorian Christian wife who wanted the caliph dead. He had everything he needed. Hulagu sent an ultimatum to Caliph al-Mustasim. Surrender and the city would be spared. Al-Mustasim refused. His advisors told him that God would not permit the city of the caliphate to fall. That Muslim armies would come from every corner of the world to defend it. They were wrong. No armies came. God was silent. On January 29, 1258, the Mongol army surrounded Baghdad. The city that had stood as the center of civilization for 500 years was about to face something it had never faced before. An enemy that did not want to rule it. An enemy that wanted to end it. The siege lasted 13 days. The walls that had protected Baghdad for 5 centuries crumbled under Mongol catapults and Chinese siege engineers. The Abbasid army that sallied out to fight was destroyed in the open field. On February 10, 1258, the walls of Baghdad were breached. The greatest city in the medieval world had no more defenders. The chronicler described what followed.
The soldiers poured in like a flood that has broken its dam. They killed everyone they found. The streets ran with blood. The mosques were not spared. The hospitals were not spared. The libraries were not spared. The screaming could be heard for miles outside the walls.
The soldiers came to the House of Wisdom. They threw every book into the Tigris River. Hundreds of thousands of manuscripts. Translations of Aristotle and Plato that existed nowhere else. Medical texts. Mathematical discoveries. Astronomical observations. Poetry. History. Philosophy. All of it went into the river. Contemporary accounts say the Tigris ran black with ink for 6 days.
They did not burn the books. They drowned them. Perhaps they thought water was kinder than fire. The result was the same. 500 years of accumulated human knowledge sank to the bottom of the Tigris. We will never know what we lost. That is the worst part. We will never know.
The chronicler recorded what eyewitnesses described.
The river ran black with ink from the books and red with blood from the people for 6 days together. The fish in the river were said to have grown fat. Scholars who survived said that so much knowledge was lost that Islamic civilization never fully recovered. They may have been right.
The caliph was brought before Hulagu. According to Mongol belief, royal blood could not be spilled on the ground. To kill a royal by shedding blood was to invite a curse. Hulagu had a solution. Al-Mustasim, the commander of the faithful, the shadow of God on earth, the 37th caliph of Islam, was wrapped in a carpet and trampled to death by horses. 800,000 people died in Baghdad in 1 week. The irrigation canals that had made Mesopotamia the breadbasket of the Middle East were deliberately destroyed. The agricultural system that had sustained civilization in Iraq for 6,000 years was broken in 7 days. Parts of Iraq did not recover for 700 years. Some parts have still not fully recovered. When news reached the Muslim world that Baghdad had fallen and the caliph was dead, the reaction was paralysis. For 600 years the caliphate had been the center of Islamic civilization. The idea that it could simply end had been unthinkable. Now it had ended. The center of the world had been removed. The world did not know where it was anymore. Some scholars escaped. Some carried manuscripts with them. Some had sent their most precious books to other cities before the siege. Not everything was lost. But what was lost was gone forever. You cannot know what you have lost when you do not know what you had. The Mongols did not conquer everything. 2 years after Baghdad fell, the Mamluk armies of Egypt stopped them at the Battle of Ain Jalut in Palestine. It was the first time the Mongols had been decisively defeated. The Islamic world was not destroyed. It was broken. There is a difference. Broken things can be rebuilt. The chronicler described the recovery.
Cairo has become what Baghdad was. The scholars who survived the Mongols have come here. The Mamluk sultans are not as cultured as the Abbasid caliphs. But they are alive and they have gold. Scholarship follows gold. Baghdad is ash. Cairo is building.
Within 40 years of destroying Baghdad, the Mongol rulers of Persia converted to Islam. The people who had drowned the House of Wisdom's books became patrons of Islamic scholarship. History is full of ironies. The Mongols destroyed the Abbasid Caliphate. Their descendants built some of the most beautiful mosques on earth.
The faith survived the caliphate. The language survived the caliphate. The ideas survived the caliphate. That is the answer. That is how civilization endures. Not in buildings, not in dynasties, in the minds of the people who carry it forward.
The Mamluks installed a surviving member of the Abbasid family in Cairo as a ceremonial caliph. He had no army, no treasury, and no territory. He had the title. For 2.5 centuries the Abbasid Caliphate continued as a religious symbol in Cairo, stripped of everything except the name. Then the Ottomans absorbed even that. The chronicler described how far the knowledge had already spread.
By 1258 the ideas of Baghdad had already traveled too far to be drowned in one river. In Timbuktu in West Africa, there are libraries of Islamic scholarship. In Andalusia and Spain the translations of Aristotle are being translated again into Latin and reaching European universities. Baghdad burned. The ideas it ignited did not.
The European Renaissance was built on Arabic translations. When European scholars rediscovered Greek philosophy in the 12th and 13th centuries, they discovered it in Arabic. The texts had been preserved in Baghdad, translated, built upon, and sent west through Islamic Spain and Sicily. The Renaissance that Europeans claim as their own began in the House of Wisdom. A new power rose to lead the Islamic world. The Ottomans. They conquered Constantinople in 1453 and claimed the Caliphate. Their Istanbul became the new Baghdad. A new golden age of Islamic art and architecture began. The Abbasid Caliphate was gone. The Islamic world had found a new center. It always does. Every time a computer runs an algorithm, it is running an idea from Baghdad. Al-Khwarazmi's algebra is the foundation of every calculation every computer on Earth performs. His name gave us the word algorithm. His mathematics gave us the digital world. The man who wrote in Baghdad 1200 years ago built the infrastructure of the 21st century. The chronicler described the scientific legacy.
Ibn al-Haytham wrote the first correct explanation of how human vision works. He invented the scientific method of experimentation before Europe had the concept. Roger Bacon, Francis Bacon, Galileo, they all built on his work. The scientific revolution that Europe claims as its own was standing on Islamic shoulders.
Coffee. The Abbasid world gave Europe coffee. Scholars in Baghdad drank it to stay awake through long nights of study. It spread through the Islamic world centuries before it reached Europe. The coffee house as a place of intellectual exchange was an Islamic invention. When coffee houses appeared in Europe in the 17th century they sparked the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment ran on Abbasid fuel. The modern hospital is an Abbasid invention. The concept of a dedicated building for medical treatment, organized by condition, with trained staff and a pharmacy, was developed in Baghdad. The word Bimaristan comes from Persian. The concept spread to Europe through Islamic Spain. The NHS, the CDC, the Mayo Clinic, they are all grandchildren of Baghdad.
We did not know we were building the future. We thought we were simply doing what was right, healing the sick, teaching the ignorant, feeding the curious. Simple duties, simple obligations. They became civilization.
The numbers you use every day are Arabic numerals transmitted through the Abbasid Caliphate. The concept of zero came from India through Baghdad to Europe. Before Arabic numerals, Europeans used Roman numerals. Try doing long division in Roman numerals. The Abbasids gave the world the ability to calculate. Everything that requires calculation owes them a debt. The chronicler looked up at the night sky.
210 stars carry Arabic names tonight. Aldebaran, Betelgeuse, Rigel, Vega, Deneb. Every astronomer on Earth, in every language, uses the names the Abbasid astronomers gave to the stars. Baghdad is gone. Its names are written in the sky. They will be there as long as there are eyes to read them.
Today scholars are racing to digitize the surviving manuscripts of the Islamic Golden Age. Hundreds of thousands of texts still sit in libraries in Timbuktu, Istanbul, Tehran, and Cairo, unread and unstudied. The river took some. Fire took some. Time took some. But not all. The House of Wisdom is still being rebuilt. One manuscript at a time. The Mongols get the blame for ending the Abbasid Golden Age. But historians argue that the Golden Age was already declining before the Mongols arrived. The question of why a civilization that brilliant stopped being brilliant is one of the most debated questions in history. The chronicler named the first cause.
In 847, the Caliph Al-Mutawakkil reversed the policy of his predecessors. He banned the rationalist school of theology. He persecuted the scholars who believed that reason and revelation could coexist. He chose orthodoxy over inquiry. The House of Wisdom survived, but the spirit that had built it began to leave.
The theologian Al-Ghazali wrote a devastating critique of Greek philosophy called The Incoherence of the Philosophers. He argued that reason could not reach truth without revelation. His work was brilliant and it was enormously influential. It shifted Islamic intellectual culture away from the open inquiry that had made the Golden Age possible. Ibn Rushd wrote a rebuttal. Europe read Ibn Rushd. The Islamic world read Al-Ghazali. The chronicler named the economic cause.
The customs duties that made Baghdad rich depended on trade passing through it. When the Crusaders disrupted the Levant routes, and when the nomads disrupted the Central Asian routes, the gold that funded the scholars and the libraries began to dry up. Scholarship is expensive. Poverty is anti-intellectual.
Political fragmentation killed the centralized patronage that had made the Golden Age possible. The House of Wisdom was funded by caliphs who considered scholarship a religious duty. When the caliphs lost power to Turkish generals and provincial warlords, the patrons changed. Warlords fund armies. Caliphs fund libraries. There were no more caliphs with power.
Every golden age requires a patron who believes knowledge is worth paying for. When the gold runs out or the patron loses faith, the scholars scatter like seeds in the wind. Some of those seeds will grow elsewhere, but the garden is gone.
Climate change and epidemic disease weakened the Abbasid world before the Mongols arrived. A prolonged drought in the 11th century disrupted agriculture across Mesopotamia. Epidemics reduced urban populations. The magnificent irrigation system that had made Baghdad possible required constant maintenance. When the administrative system weakened, the canals were neglected. The land dried. The people left. The chronicler described Baghdad before the Mongols.
The city that held 1 million people now holds perhaps 200,000. The great markets are half empty. The House of Wisdom still stands, but it is a ghost of what it was. The Mongols did not destroy a living city at its peak. They destroyed a city that had been dying for a century. The death blow was real. The patient was already sick.
The Abbasid Caliphate is gone. Islam is not. 1.8 billion people follow the faith that the Caliphate carried and spread. The religion survived the state. That is the most important legacy. Every empire ends. The ideas some empires carry can outlast every empire that ever existed. The chronicler described the living intellectual legacy.
Every Arab mathematician, every Muslim physician, every Islamic philosopher working today is working in a tradition that began in Baghdad. The chain was broken by the Mongols. It was repaired. The repair took centuries. The chain holds.
The Alhambra Palace in Granada was built by Muslims who carried the Abbasid cultural tradition to Spain. Its geometric patterns, its water gardens, its philosophical inscriptions on every wall represent the last flowering of the tradition that Baghdad started. When Spain expelled its Muslims in 1492, that tradition left Europe. It left its buildings behind. The University of Bologna, the oldest university in Europe, was teaching Arabic translations of Aristotle in the 12th century. Oxford, Paris, Cambridge. Every medieval European university curriculum was built on knowledge that had been preserved, translated, and expanded in Baghdad. The Western university system is an Abbasid gift to Europe that Europe has largely forgotten to acknowledge.
We did not give the world knowledge expecting gratitude. We gave it because knowledge demands to be given. A lamp that lights another lamp loses nothing. We lit every lamp we could reach. Some of those lamps are still burning.
There are projects today to rebuild the House of Wisdom in Baghdad. To create a new center of scholarship at the place where the original stood. The Tigris still flows where the books were drowned. The city that was the center of the world is rebuilding itself. History is long. Baghdad was great before the Caliphate. It may be great again after it. The chronicler spoke of what survives.
They threw the books in the river, but they did not get them all. In the libraries of Istanbul, there are manuscripts from Baghdad that survive because a scholar carried them out under his robe. In Timbuktu, there are texts that reached Africa before the Mongols reached Baghdad. Knowledge that could not be drowned. Knowledge that hid in the bodies of the people who loved it enough to run.
The Tigris River still flows through Baghdad. It no longer runs black with ink. The books are gone. The fish that grew fat on 5 centuries of human knowledge are gone. The river does not remember what it drowned. Rivers never do. But we remember. The chronicler held a surviving manuscript.
This page was written in Baghdad before the Mongols came. Someone carried it out. Someone hid it. Someone passed it to someone else who passed it to someone else across 8 centuries until it reached this library. Every page that survived is a story of someone who thought knowledge was worth dying to protect.
The mathematicians who built the digital world stood on Abbasid algebra. The physicians who mapped the human genome stand on Abbasid medicine. The astronomers who name new stars use Abbasid star names. The people who built the modern world were standing on Baghdad's shoulders, and most of them did not know it. Some of them still do not. Hulagu Khan's grandson converted to Islam. His great-grandson built mosques. The Mongols who threw the books in the river became the patrons of Islamic scholarship within 2 generations. The destroyers became the builders. History does this. History is not a straight line. It is a river. It goes around obstacles. It finds new channels. It always reaches the sea. The chronicler spoke his final words.
The Caliphate lasted 500 years. The Golden Age lasted 300 years. The books burned in 1 week. But the algebra is still running. The star names are still shining. The coffee is still brewing. The hospitals are still healing. The ideas that Baghdad made are older than the Mongols and younger than yesterday. You cannot drown an idea. The river tried.
While Europe could not read, Baghdad had 1,000,000 books. While Europe built in mud, Baghdad built in mathematics. While Europe feared the dark, Baghdad named the stars. Then the river ran black for 6 days. And the world forgot where its light came from. Remember Baghdad. Remember what burns when libraries burn. Remember that it could happen again. Like and subscribe to Empires Untold.